Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. So, Graham, that's a really good point that you just made, except you made it like, I think 2 weeks ago because we got cut off and I messed up the recording and the whole second half of our wonderful conversation was pure performance art that was never recorded. So welcome back. And I think you were pretty prescient in the meantime because the G7 got together just a few days ago and decided that they were going to set the minimum corporate tax level at 15%, which, I think that's overall going to be a good thing because I think that, and people have been leveraging that to their advantage. And I think that
it's good that they're going to tax where they're doing business, not just where they're registered. And I think that is a good move.
Yeah. I mean,
he says pretending to be that it was 2 weeks ago. Well, I hope people don't notice the difference in our voices. But,
we're 2 weeks older. They can hear it. Well, so we talked about Moby and you guys being a hard act for him to follow, which I just think is so awesome. I like saying that over and over. And I
don't. I can't remember that now.
Well, and we talked about the great project that you're doing and the experience that you've had all over the world with musicians. We talked about what some of the things that people could learn from you and the difficulty of performing on Zoom, even for someone with so much experience as you. And I also, I wonder if there's anything else that stands out for you in all of your experience, because you've been all over the world and you get to, I think there's almost no more powerful saying than I'm with the band, right? That'll just get you out of almost anything because everybody likes the band. They want good music, right? So, if you're with the band and you're part of that effort, they're going to, give you a pass, wave you in, welcome you in. So what are some of the things that you've noticed because what an interesting intersection to look at. There are lots of people who've been all over the world, but maybe they've been a corporate executive or they've been doing something else. You've been all over the world and you've been doing music and you've been going for some of the most local music that you can possibly find. That's just a rad trip to be on. What have you noticed about human beings and human nature and things like that?
I guess the biggest thing I'd say we've seen is how one thing influences another. I mean, I think it's one of those things, particularly as the world sadly kind of, lurches to the right and borders kind of go up everywhere. I mean, it's understandable, obviously, in sort of COVID times, but even before that, you could see it was happening. And people somehow, a lot of people often have this thought that their culture kind of is theirs and that's it, and it never influences anything else. And when in fact, all cultures influence others. And you do kind of often, particularly within music, you do realize that is such an obvious thing. And I don't just mean how, the blues influenced, sort of R&B and then R&B influenced. I don't so much mean just in modern times. Yeah. You do kind of realize that a lot of music does and has traveled and influenced other styles of music, which then has influenced other styles of music and actual kind of instruments themselves. I mean, everyone knows, or a lot of people know about the obvious ones, like in the States, in America, the banjo obviously came, from West Africa, sadly, and unfortunately with slavery and everything. I think was it the banja? It was called. It was like a sort of a little kind of West African guitar, which slowly changed over time. And I don't so much mean the obvious things like that. You do kind of just see how. I mean, how music can influence other styles. And we were in Indonesia last year, 2019, for a project. It's 2020. Sorry, sorry. That's the thing with the pandemic is you sort of have to kind of write off this entire year of sort of and everyone says, "Oh, last year I was." No, it wasn't last year. It was the year before. Yeah. Sorry, in early 2020, just before the pandemic, we were in.
And where in Indonesia?
This particular bit was in Surakarta, what's locally known as Solo City, because we flew into Jakarta and then flew all the way down to Surakarta, spent time there. Then we had to get a 10-hour sort of overnight train to Bandung. Yeah. Then we did some recording in Bandung, and then we traveled all the way up the coast again to Jakarta and then flew back. But we were there for a few weeks or so. Yeah. But on the first night in Surakarta, somebody took us to, there was a big festival happening all across the city, and somebody took us to an outdoor gig. And the music that was being performed sounded very, very Latin. And I just thought, on our first night there, I thought this, we've performed. I've been to Indonesia before, and obviously everybody knows about the gamelan sort of music. And I thought this is very, very Latin. This sounds very, doesn't sound very Indonesian. When the band finished, we went over and spoke to them, and they just said it was this style of music called krongkong, which is just very particular to that area of Indonesia. And I said, but it sounded very, very Latin. And they said that was because quite a few hundred years ago, all of the sailors that would land there and do trading, they brought with them sort of music from Portugal and from Spain. And also they brought with them very, very small, like timples, very small guitars. Yeah. And over time, that since has changed in Indonesia, and you now get these two instruments called a chuk and a chak, and one of them is like a very small guitar-style instrument that's 3-string, and one that's 4-string, and they're only really ever played together in a duet. And so again, it's sort of taken on that localized sort of instrumentation where, like within sort of performers of gamelan, they all play it together. It's considered one instrument, and you have 30 people all playing together, but it's considered one thing. And I just thought it was quite interesting that these two guitars are only ever played together, and they're very specific. One plays this bit, the other plays the other bit. Yeah. And the fact that even the instrument and the style of music was like local music that had blended, 400, 500 years ago with Portuguese and Spanish music. And that to me was just proof of that thing that music does just travel, and everything influences everything else.
Yeah. One of the things that this might be one of the things that would be more obvious to you than it was to me. But I remember when I went to LA, I ran away with my rock band when I was 20 and went to LA, and we lived in Venice Beach, and we had, there was an apartment where a lot of local workers had come up from Mexico, and they would always play their, Mexican music. And I grew up in a family that's mostly German. My mom's right from southern Germany, and my dad's mom's from southern Germany. And I was like, it's so weird. It sounds like oompa music, all these Mexican guys playing what sounded to me like German oompa music. Well, I mean, it turns out that a long time ago, lots of folks from Germany went to Mexico, and they brought that style, and it heavily influenced the local music, So, so I think that the other thing that I've learned as I get older, and I think it took me getting older, is when I think that there's probably a connection in things like that, it's not a mistake. It's not random. Like, there probably is a connection.
Yeah. I mean, all of human history is completely that. That's why totally. I just find it so bizarre that you do get some people think, our country is ours, and it's always been ours, or that kind of bizarre mentality to think that, migration and people moving back isn't anything new. And I don't even mean the last couple of hundred years. It's been going on for like the last 100,000 years or whatever. 500, the last million years. I mean, it's just gone on for a long, long time where people change and they introduce different things into cultures. And I mean, this is why you have to look at certain religions, and you see how they've obviously all influenced each other way back. Someone somewhere probably said, those guys over there, they do X, Y, Z. Maybe we should do that, and then they go, okay, totally. Okay, let's take that on. And I'm sure that clearly that kind of thing once happened. And I think it's no different with music or anything else that people just sort of say, I like the way that those people dress. And, I like those we should take those kind of shirts and make them else, fashion to anything. Everything is just influenced by everything else. And, I think that the sooner we all realize that, the better.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we just had a woman. I have an ongoing leadership group. It's a transformational leadership program, and we've got a bunch of people who are up to big things in that group, and we meet on a very regular basis. And one of the things we do is we pick a book every month and we read it, and then we have a conversation about it. And the one we just read recently is called Mirror Thinking. In fact, I have it right here. Mirror Thinking by Fiona Murden. And she talks about the mirror neurons. Human beings have mirror neurons. They're neurons in our bodies that fire when we see other people going through experiences. So if somebody walks in happy, we get happy. We don't even know why. Why are you so happy, Graham? Oh, or if you're sad, oh, I get sad, right? You walk in, you look sad. I'm sad. I don't even know why I'm sad. Maybe you lost the lottery and I won, but I'm still sad for a minute because you're sad. That's mirror neurons. And I think I haven't really dug into the research yet, but it's something that I want to do now. Music. Oh my gosh, music and mirror neurons, right? When we hear that music and we see other people dancing and, and it's weird to me. This is one of those other things that maybe sounds silly, but that as an older person now, I'm like, okay, well, there's got to be something to that just because it's got to be something to that. But think about different styles of music and how you dance. And like when you hear tango music and then you see people dancing tango, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Right. And when you hear, the Talking Heads and you see David Byrne kind of bonking around on stage, like, oh, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I wonder what the research would say about mirror neurons and types of music and ways that we get influenced to dance by how it's, that would be an interesting thing to study, right?
Well, I think that it's also mirror neurons, I guess, are very much part of that whole collective experience. And I think that's why, particularly within music, it's so important to share it with other people in that experience. And what's so devastating and terrible with the current pandemic and the whole
That's
thing
absolutely right.
of gigs everywhere being, sort of banned effectively. And I think that's why shared experience, particularly at gigs and at music festivals, people go there to have that shared experience, because I'm sure that even if you went to somewhere in the middle of a field just by yourself and listened to a DJ or a band and you were on your own, even though it's exactly the same gig, the same music, it simply wouldn't be the same experience as standing in a field with 100,000 other people, all kind of like elated and dancing. Right. And I think you're right. It's the whole thing of, that shared experience. I guess if you're surrounded by a load of very happy people, you cannot help but, be happy. Yeah. Unless you're very tragic and very sad and you're in a very bad mood and just like you're grumpy because all these people around you are happy and you're not. But I guess it's the same also for cinema and things. However much it's good to watch films at home and, in the comfort of your own home, there is something about the whole shared experience of sitting there in an audience, which is why theatre is still so popular. It's not like when film and TV came along, theatre didn't die. It's not like sort of live acting and the stage just suddenly vanished and disappeared, because people still like to experience it.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's a company called Gold Star, and they get half price tickets and great deals and early access to all kinds of live events. And the original thought they had, I was the first employee, right? Just I'm a part owner, full disclosure. But they, the idea was if people want to get entertained on a Friday night, they go to the Cinemaplex, and probably, cause there's like 85 theaters there, probably something they want to see is going to be playing within the next half an hour. Right. So that's just what they do. But so Gold Star wanted to make that kind of an experience for people, but to go to live events, because performed live events, it's such a different experience, but it was much harder, right? So Gold Star brought all that stuff together, gave people deals so that they would go try things they wouldn't otherwise. And it's been very successful. And then pandemic, bang, 36 hours from 100% to 0%, So they have started over the past year, they've been working on a thing called Stellar tickets. And Stellar's idea is that because of the pandemic, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like this would never have happened without the pandemic, I don't think. it would have been too uneven. But because everybody got pushed into this at once and everybody had to figure something out, there are a lot of people now that are live arts producers and creators who are figuring out, really going down that path of figuring out how to do great stuff online. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but I do remember the difference between early cinema and like Charlie Chaplin and, you know, moving pictures without even sound. And then, you know, whatever, like the Citizen Kane, right? The first real use of cinema. So I wonder what that's going to look like because people are going to be doing this now, right? Like that's something that's going to get better and better. It'll be interesting to see.
I know we're living in very interesting times. I think to be able to see that, I mean, I do sometimes think I'm glad I'm the age that, I mean, it sounds a very silly thing to say, but I mean, I was only, I think, like, how old was I? Like 7 years old, 8 years old. I remember when Star Wars first came out, but to witness that change in cinema, it's however big a film is, it's not the same thing. It really isn't the same. It's not that, oh, wow, it's the latest interesting big superhero film. No. It's the fact that it just changed kind of,
oh my God,
cinema culture. It
sure did.
And I mean, in the same way that Jurassic Park changed again cinema culture using CGI, because before then it was all stop motion sort of Ray Harryhausen style kind of monsters and things. And as soon as you saw, okay, it was, what was it, 92, as soon as you saw Jurassic Park and you saw these huge dinosaurs, you were like, what? You know, wow. Even though you know it's cinema, you're like, wow, I've not seen anything like that. And I think obviously as technology increases, it just gets harder and harder and harder for there to be something new in that sense. And you do often wonder, are we going to see anything like that in our lifetimes again? But probably we will, even though VR type experiences and AR are new. They're not, I mean, maybe it's difficult to say whether they're game changers or not until the game actually changes.
Fully ready for prime time yet. But
no, I mean, I mean, same as yourself. I'm sure I've experienced those things, but you go, wow, God, that's interesting. But it's not like, wow, God, it's just so completely different. This is just going to change everything.
Do you remember? You do remember, like, I think I'm a little older than you, Graham, but I remember sitting in the theater and like the first time the lightsaber came out, I was just like, oh my God. And then, you know, when he's going across the desert in that land speeder and it's floating, how did they do that? I remember thinking, oh my gosh, you know, and then the two suns on the horizon. I mean, Star Wars was just like, I was just at the prime age to have my mind blown by that movie.
No, I was as well. And it did. And I think in many ways, probably similar to yourself, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for that, you know, because it sort of got me onto a whole thing of, you know, working in entertainment and blah, 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 blah.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, as it happens, yesterday I was asked to do a talk in a new, they're still at beta stage for a new app that I was asked to do, like a leadership kind of, you know, I was asked to do a talk called Connect Club. And in the last year or so, what's that? That Clubhouse that was launched.
Yeah, Clubhouse.
It's a bit like Clubhouse, but it is so much more. It is. I mean, if Clubhouse themselves don't move in this direction, it's probably going to disappear. It was like Clubhouse, but with video and screen sharing. And you were able to link to, a laptop or whatever that's next to it. So you could do kind of PowerPoint presentations and this kind of thing inside this app. And it was all graphical interfaces. And so it was really, really clever. So you'd sort of get like an architect sort of view plan of a room, say, like from above, where you'd see like a bar and and there's different seating areas and this kind of thing. And you can see lots of people within that. And the really, really clever thing is they've got a big radius circle, and anyone within that radius around you, they can hear you. And you can hear them. And so if you want to have a private talk with someone, say there's a whole big room and you and me want to have a little chat like this now, you simply say, John, let's go and talk over by the plant pot over there where there's those two chairs. And you simply move your little head, the little video with you that's the live camera of you. You just slide it over there. and you slide it over there too, and a little circle goes around us, and then we just start talking, and no one else can hear us. But you're still in a room that's got 300 other people in it, and if somebody else slides over into the little room, then they can hear us as well. Just like in real life, it's not completely private, and if you want to have a private conversation when no one else joins in, you leave the room and you go and join another one, exactly as you would in real life. You just go and join. You go into another room, and I just thought that the whole thing was just really, and it just worked really, really well. In the sense that there was a TV that they said to me, can you show us some slides and just show us some pictures from orchestra samples and what you're doing as a project, which is the project we were talking about earlier, where we've been around the world recording lots of musicians and sampling them. And I just sort of slid my icon over to the TV screen. And then where it just said, tap to share your screen, you tap on it. And then it gave you a little link that you could then, on your phone, because the whole thing, the app's on the phone, it gave you a little link that you could then just share, whether it's via, WhatsApp or an email or any other, how you would share in any other way. You could upload it to wherever. And so you could just email it to yourself or whatever, and take that link, just put it in a browser, and then it instantly connected to the little room that you were in on this app. And so then whatever was on your screen, whether you're doing a PowerPoint presentation or you're just opening a browser and showing something on the web, it would just come up in the little TV that was in the little room. So it's kind of like, imagine, Clubhouse, but you can see everybody, and it's a bit like we're talking now, where, you've got, you can see a bit like sort of, it's kind of like Clubhouse meets Zoom, but with a very graphical interface.
Yeah, with that architect view of the room.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can just move around in it, and they're a little, it's a bit like looking above that, an architect's view of, a hotel lobby or bar, where you've got lots of little seating areas, and you've got sort of,
I think I was just in this a little bit ago too. I do pitch coaching for an accelerator in LA, and they had a virtual event. I think it was in this same thing. I've got to go double check.
Yeah, maybe it was. They've got offices in LA, and
maybe that's what it is. Maybe they're local.
I think I think the head office is in Cyprus. I think it was, because a lot of the people in the room, some were in Cyprus, some were in Russia, some were in LA, and some were in. There was the guy who was interviewing me that I was talking to was from New York, or was in New York, and so it was a kind of a real international mix of people from everywhere. I thought it was a really, really good app, and even though they've soft launched it, but they haven't fully. I mean, you can still anyone can join up, but I think they haven't really given it big press and a big push everywhere yet. It's still sort of in the earlier stages.
Well, this conversation reminds me kind of randomly of something that I say a lot that I would love to hear your take on. And here's what I say a lot. I say your speech, your pitch, whatever, it's not a presentation. It's a performance. And I think about you guys, because you guys freaking perform, right? You don't get up on stage and present us with your material and we can do with it what we want. You get up on stage and you drive us into a freaking frenzy of just amazingness, right? And I've got to think that you take responsibility for the audience's experience. Is that correct? Would you say that you consciously do that?
In some ways, yes, because obviously whatever it is you're doing to entertain people or talk to people while you're up on a stage has got to still engage them. And so I think it's your responsibility not to offend them, shock them too much, to turn them all off in a way that they just suddenly leave the room. It's like you wouldn't be a very good DJ if you just constantly played music that just cleared the floor and just everybody left.
Right,
and,
right.
But even though that happens to everybody, that's happened to us before. And it's thoroughly unpleasant. And where you just think, I wonder if this track will go down, and and in fact that was our other AV show, similar to what you saw all those years ago in Austin, when we played at South by Southwest. Where was it? It was a gig in Spain somewhere, and we thought, I won't say what it is because it's a bit controversial, but we played a particular track that where we'd sampled and remixed a particular film, and just culturally it really just didn't go down well at all, and just it was such a weird thing that the whole it was quite a large club for 3,000 people odd. The dance floor, it was a huge kind of dance floor, and more than half, 60%, 70%, everybody just like walked off. And we were like, what the hell? And people were kind of walking up to kind of near the stage where we were, and they were kind of, flipping the middle finger and all of this kind of stuff. And it was like, and we thought, I think we've seriously offended like a lot of people here. And it was just quite shocking because to sort of, because what we did would have gone down, and it has done, and we've since played it in the UK. That in the UK and in other countries that would go down really, really well, and it has done. But for some weird reason, when we played it in Spain, it really didn't. It rubbed all the audience up the wrong way, and that was such a weird experience. But so yes, you're right that you do have that responsibility, and I guess that when something like that happens, it's your responsibility to recover very quickly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like to contrast that because a performer would never even begin to argue that point, right? Like a performer, like that's why I like to get people to think about their leadership and their communication like a performance, right? And it's not that it's inauthentic or you're being something you're not. That's not what I mean. What I mean is any performer ever, if they went out on stage and their act didn't really go, turn people on and wake them up and bring them in, they would go look for what they could do better. Right. But speakers often kind of seem to have this attitude of like, well, I told them the information, and if they're not smart enough to, it's like, no, sorry. If you're going to go get up in front of a whole bunch of people and consume their time, you need to be responsible for making this a really great performance. And, it's in the world of speaking, I always point out, I admit to people because it's an embarrassing thing to admit, but it's true. For a long time, I wanted to check the box. I said it. Right? Like, we'll get up and we're going to play our songs. We played them, right? Okay, but that doesn't help, right? I realized I wasn't getting what I wanted a lot of the time, but I was still able to check the box. I told you so, but so what? So I started getting interested in checking the box. They got it, right? It landed over there.
Yeah, that's better.
And that's such a performance thing, I think.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Because I think the audiences, by and large, 99 times out of 100, they've paid to be there, or they've made the conscious decision to go there, even if it's like a big outdoor free event or whatever. They've made it's very few instances where people are forced to sort of be there, or to, it's only really at school or something like that, or at college that you have to attend these things and be there. And so, and that's what I do often think. You're right. There's certain kind of people when they give those kind of speeches and things, you just think, you need to engage more, because, people don't have to be there. It's not like a lecture where they've got to learn X, Y, Z, and then you're marking all their coursework at the end of it. I think that not enough kind of, often when I've attended things where you see people speaking, they often, like you say, it's more about, they're not ticking that box of do people get this, so they understand it. It's more about, I'm just going to tell you, this is what I'm doing. Yeah. This is what I want you to, and then it can just lose people. And that's why, and the downside of that though is the current state of a lot of politics around the world, where politicians are just boiling it down to like 3 or 4 words, where it's just let's say something, and that's it. It's just like silly slogans where then everyone just repeats that, and it's just boiling it down to the most basicest of rather than giving inspirational kind of speeches. And I think that with a lot of leaders in today's world, I think that's sorely lacking, actually, is that there isn't that kind of, there's not many that are giving, inspirational kind of talks. And I mean, Barack Obama did. He's one of the few that in recent memory that was somebody who could stand there and command people's attention, whether you kind of voted for his politics or didn't. He's got that, and that's what's always, I find, worrying if somebody, say, is an incredibly right-wing kind of person who, and sorry for anybody who's listening who might have that persuasion of their political beliefs, but someone who can be, say, quite dangerous, but they happen to have that very good personality and they can win people over, and that's always kind of
well, I think there are people like that at the extreme left too. You know,
absolutely.
Like I've never pulled harder for the middle in my life than I am now. You know, and I think you're right, and I think it's one of those they're not being responsible for what people are hearing and what they're saying, right? Like, absolutely. I mean, whether you agree with it or not, what Trump said, you know, I think he didn't get how influential he was on that particular group of people, and the January 6th insurrection happened. And I think that is absolutely a case of him not being responsible for what they were actually hearing. He thought that he could say those things and it wouldn't be as effective towards that end as you know, as it could be. And
and the whole thing about, you know, sort of, you know, using bleach to or whatever to kill, you know, COVID. And of course there were instances where people said, the president said it, then, you know, and there were people that drank it and it killed them. And I think that sometimes, people have got to be responsible for what it is they say when they don't. And I mean, of course, you're often hearing, you know, and now, particularly in the UK, where I am, is that you're getting a lot of this kind of thing where people are saying things that they think that stupidly they either think is funny or it's just a comment, and they're saying it kind of on social media. And they don't realise that that's publishing it. It's not saying it to just 3 people in a bar. You know, they're publishing it to potentially millions of people, and then those other people, then pick up on it, share it, and so people need to be responsible for what it is that they are saying. You know, and you know, and sometimes people do say very, very stupid things that they think are funny. But they're not, and they it's like you say, there is that kind of where people say, like Trump did, that he just thought, I can say these things, and I'm not actually saying, hey, let's have a revolution, but I'm sort of just saying these things. But of course, you know, what you're intimating is being picked up on by people who go, he wants us to go and, you know, storm the Capitol. And people can. They've got to realize that sort of words are powerful and can be very dangerous.
And I think it's ironic to say it, but I think that, you know, a lot of these politicians, Trump included, don't fully understand their own power. They don't fully understand the actual power of words. And I think the other thing that that's being misunderstood, and I think on both sides, but you know, some are more obvious than others, is the impact of those words over time, right? It may get you what you want in the short moment here, but those words are now out there. That thing that you said is now out there. That idea has been legitimized. What's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years because of that thing? That got you a very small victory, but a victory here, but that's going to end up coming back to bite everybody, you know? The power of words, the power of words.
And when you listen to sort of really old speeches by even people like, you know, Martin Luther King or something, you can see that they, not only was he clearly an inspirational speaker, he really kind of clearly understood subject matter of what he was talking about, because a lot of what he said isn't what you were saying, that it's just in the moment, it only means something for then. It clearly resonates, you know, decades and decades and decades later, and still completely makes sense. And so that's what I think is missing, sadly, in a lot of politics around the world today, is people who have that foresight and aren't thinking just to the next election or just thinking to the next, you know, crisis and just jumping from one to the other, and just, you know, they are thinking about, you know, the next 20 years, 30 years, long before they're going to be, you know, after they're going to be out of politics, but they're thinking for the greater good. But I think that, but it's not just in politics. I think you're getting that across the world in business and everywhere. You're getting a lot of people and leaders that are just thinking only about like their thing for now, for the short term, and not the long term. You know, maybe the projections are only going the next few years or something. Not, I mean, obviously there are others like Elon Musk's or whoever that are thinking much longer term. But he, even though someone like him is thinking much longer term, I wouldn't exactly describe him as an inspirational speaker. He's,
not exactly.
No, it's quite entertaining when you see him speak, but he clearly is somebody. It seems to me he doesn't really like speaking in public and being sort of having to kind of, that's clearly not sort of his makeup, where you see that he doesn't quite enjoy it, and he's probably really relieved as soon as he gets off the stage. Yeah. But
Well, I think he just announced on Saturday Night Live that he's on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum. And so I think that might be one thing that gives him that intense focus and brilliance, and makes him makes speaking a much more difficult
thing
kind of thing for
That's
him.
why I was very surprised that he did Saturday Night Live. I just thought, why would you want to put yourself in that? But then again, when you're in his position, it might be just such an intriguing and interesting kind of proposition. You go, well,
why not say no to that, Graham?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would.
There probably are.
Whoever they are, they go, oh, you got to be kidding. But of course, there are others who would jump at it.
It makes me think. This conversation makes me think about, again, coming back to performance in music and that mindset. When people sit down to write a song, like, of course, they would love to write a song that is going to stand the test of time, right? And what I love about what you said about Martin Luther King and others, wow, what if I took on that every time I wrote a speech, or every time I got an opportunity to really be heard, I thought about that in the context of all of history and making it something that would stand the test of time, instead of just something that I'm doing, for this short moment that's going to get forgotten. Because it's all getting recorded now, so it will be around somewhere. So I think that's a really incredible, wonderful goal, I think, is to, once you've got that thing, give it another look and say, will this stand the test of time? Because I can't say that I've ever done that with my speeches. I haven't thought about, is there something for the future and the ages in this,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have. I'd have to go back and listen to some recording that someone's recorded. I have listened to things I've said before, sort of publicly, when I have kind of done speeches and things, and I think, wow, actually, that's not too bad. Yeah, that's, that was insightful. And other times I've listened and gone, oh God, did I say that? But it's just like,
I think we
cringe. But it's it just, I guess it depends on. Sometimes I guess depending on what it is you're talking about, you've got to be careful not to be swept up in that moment that 1 year, 2 years later, it won't make sense what it is you're talking about, if you are trying to make something that will, stand the test of time. Yeah.
All of a sudden I want to sing My Sharona, which is still a pretty fun song, but I don't know.
My Corona.
Yeah. Well, so is there anything else that we haven't delved into that you'd like to talk about, Graham? Anything else you want to tell us about, what's coming up for you in the future, or thoughts you've had on leadership since we got a 2-week break?
Depending on when this comes out, this Friday, the 11th of June, we're releasing a new track, Rebab Jam, which is very much sort of the right kind of sound for sort of a soundtrack for hot weather.
Nice.
It's a recording of it's from Orchestra of Samples, and the lead instrument is a rebab, which is a one string violin type instrument that you play upright. It's bowed, a bowed instrument the one string from the Amazigh culture that people formerly called Berber in North Africa, and we recorded it in the desert in Morocco. It was just so hot when we recorded that.
Wow!
And we just found when we sampled it, it fitted beautifully with this sort of very calypso-like guitar from acoustic guitar that we recorded in Cartagena in Colombia, which is on the Caribbean coast. And just the whole thing just really, really gelled. And that's this new track that we've got coming out. Those are not the only instruments. I think that track has more instruments than any other in the whole. I think it's got 11 sampled instruments that all really blend and fit together. But that comes out Friday. And then in fact, if you're even interested, on the 17th of June, we're doing an online Q&A over Zoom, where anyone can come in and listen to how about us talk about the project, how we made the project, and how we created Rebab Jam, going through all the samples and trying to find, what worked and what didn't.
Wow.
And then on the 24th, really cool. The following week, we're doing an actual workshop, an online workshop over Zoom where people can download samples from Rebab Jam for free from our website. And download GarageBand, the app, which is free as well, so you can download it on your phone or iPad. And it's going to be a workshop about how to remix the samples and create a remix. So that's the 11th comes out. The 17th is the Q&A, and then the 24th is the remix.
Well, and
workshop.
Graham, I don't know if this conversation will be out by then, but here's what I think we should do. I'll ask you to send me the links for all of those.
Okay.
And then, maybe on the day that it drops on the 11th, I'll put together an announcement and put it out on all my channels and say, hey, upcoming podcast guest, Graham Daniels and Addictive TV just dropped this song. They've also got this thing going, and then, we've got the podcast coming out sometime. So we'll put that out for you, because I think that's just super exciting. And I know
join and ask some questions yourself.
Yeah. I'd love to do that.
Ask some very difficult ones, and then I'll just say someone else can answer it. Not
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. And, it strikes me, and I know we're coming up on the end of time here of our time, but not on the end of all time, but on the end of our time.
I didn't know the end of the world was scheduled for this afternoon.
So, but that whole idea of taking samples and putting them together and having that whole thing work out, that's a lot like being a leader too, right? You've got these different people. They all have different tone and timbre, and they all have different, right? And none of them are necessarily good or bad.
It's about finding the right people that would fit together in the same way we find the right samples that work together. I think that's very much a kind of, a facet of a good leader is that somebody who can sort of go, that person is really good at XYZ, and that person is really good at ABC, and so they should really work together, and that's how you get good teams, and that's why so often, particularly in sort of very transient kind of industries like film, that's why often you find that a lot of directors, they want to often work with the same teams, not because they're just their mates, and that it's because it's a really well-oiled machine, and they're all good at their jobs, and that's why often when you do get certain kind of productions, and I mean, even ourselves, we've been involved with projects where, you may work with different people who, the gel just sort of isn't quite there, and so it becomes slightly more problematic depending on what it is that you're doing, and that kind of thing. That happens to everybody, and I guess in a more permanent sort of workplace, then it becomes even more vital because people aren't just working together for a few weeks or something, or a couple of months. They're working together for years. And so they do have to be the right things that slot, the right people that slot together. And I think, you're right that in that sense, that is a good analogy with what we're doing. That, you're trying to find the right samples that fit together. Yeah,
that's funny. That's cool. Well, and I think, that combination of a rebab and a calypso guitar might not be immediately obvious, but when it occurs to you and you imagine it and put it together and it works, like how cool is that, right?
Yeah, and we've had really good feedback where people have just said, wow, I really didn't expect something like this would work, but it does. Well, and that's partly the whole thing about orchestra of samples, is that you're not sort of, recording hundreds of just guitarists and pianists and all the usual and going, oh yeah, we just took piano and we fitted with guitar and all the things you expect. It's far more about the unexpected, that you say, well, there's this really weird instrument from wherever, and you've never heard of it, and it fits really well with this other quite strange instrument from somewhere else, that in the real world, the two instruments would never normally be heard together. And it also fits with this guitar or this piano or whatever. And that's the interesting thing, that when you hear it, you just go, oh, wow, it's just music. And you don't, you don't find yourself thinking, oh, what's that instrument, or what is that weird sound, or what is that, And the weirdest thing that was one of the reasons why we found it fitted well was when you listen to it, the reverb, this one string sort of violin type instrument, it actually at times sounds like a muted trumpet. That's the thing.
Interesting.
It's got that kind of sort of, and it sounds a bit like a 1930s and sort of muted trumpet, and that's what was quite interesting, that we found that it just naturally felt like some sort of calypso-y, sort of reggae-ish ska. That ding 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 and that's why when you listen, if you weren't told what the instrument was, you may think it's like a sort of a muted trumpet, but it's not. It's a reverb. It's this one-string violin that we recorded in the desert in Morocco, and I think that's one of the fascinating things I like about the project as well. Is that
now I can hardly
see.
wait.
Now you want to see it. Now you want to join the talk and go. But what if,
Yeah.
I want to ask a really difficult question.
Yeah, I'll think of one for you, Graham. So
I'll think of a good answer about not answering. Yeah.
Okay, good. And I do want to say thank you. Sorry about our technical glitch there.
Not a problem.
Hope that this all ends up bridging out nicely for our listeners. And I do appreciate your generosity coming back. And I cannot wait to come see you perform again sometime, somewhere in this big wide world. And I'm just glad I bumped into you that day at South by Southwest and that we managed to stay in touch, Graham. I'm so happy about that.
Me too.
Awesome. Okay. Well, have a great afternoon there in the UK, and we'll talk to you soon. And thanks for listening. I wish everyone a wonderful day, and think about, what you could take from that idea of performance and from the generosity of musicians and performers to bring to your leadership and your communication. And thanks again for joining us, Graham Daniels of Addictive TV.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.